Hello, and welcome to another episode of Scavenger Life. This is episode number 160 at scavengerlife.com. And today, Jay and I are speaking to Kate, who is a fellow eBay seller and a commenter on the blog.
So, Kate, we were wondering a couple of things. Number one is, can you first just talk about what is your setup? I mean, so you're a mom who sells on eBay. I mean, is that basically what how you come at this?
Yeah, that's right. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to have a business so I can bring in a part-time income, something where I don't have to be somewhere or report somewhere or be responsible to somebody else, something where I can just walk away when I get the call from school that, someone has a stomach bug or,
Right.
Whatever. I can just drop everything for as long as I need to drop it and do, what needs to be done here.
Yeah, and so I'm going to kind of back into what we're really going to talk about. But it seems like the mom sale on eBay is like a big thing that I see on the internet. So what is your daily schedule like? Is it like the kids are at school for 3 hours and that's when it's your scavenging and all that?
Now my kids it started out that way. Now they're older, so they're in school for a full day. But I'm still doing this only part-time. I do go out and do some sort of scavenging every day. When I go out to the grocery store, or, any of the other little errands, I always tack on scavenging. Sometimes it's only 20 minutes. Sometimes it's, 3 or 4 hours. It just depends on what else I have to do that day, what the other
I'm going to
are.
assume it's probably more, it's like us, just where we're just kind of always in scavenger mode no matter what we're doing. So we're just out and about, and suddenly I see like some stuff on the side of the road, or there's like a little store I've never been to, right?
Right. Right. And also, I almost completely, except for, socks and underpants and things. Everything, all the kids' clothes are coming from the thrift store.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like constantly, looking out for stuff that we need at home.
So the two of us don't have kids, but I can't believe that people that have kids buy anything brand new. It just seems like there's such a plethora of like kids' toys and clothes. It's unbelievable.
It's outrageous. Yeah, and the prices for kids' clothes.
Yeah.
They're not cheap. The cheap stuff, it falls apart so quickly. At least if you're finding things at a thrift store, you know that they have some staying power. They've already made it through one kid.
Well,
right?
there's so much kid stuff. It's almost like you never have to ever wash kids' clothes. You can just get a bag of new kids' clothes every single week and just throw it away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's, this, when you're scavenging, when you're out at the thrift stores and things, kids' stuff, household stuff, just stuff. It's just, I can't believe that things are still being manufactured because there's so much already out there.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, we come home with so much stuff. All the time. It's just like, how can anyone go to a regular store anymore?
Yeah.
On the rare occasions when I do go to a regular store, I get overwhelmed by all the meaningless choices. Do you want this in, teal, hot pink, purple, whatever.
Yeah.
There are so many choices that you have to make about things that are
right. I think that's why we love scavenging, because it kind of makes us make use of things that are just available.
Right.
So I don't have a lot of choice. I'm like, okay, I can make that work. That'll be okay. Yeah.
Right. Here's one pair of pants. Does it fit? Yes or no? Do I like it? Yes or no? If yes to both, buy it. If not, leave it behind. And it's that, you don't have to spend 20 minutes, do I want the black or the charcoal gray, or the...
So are your kids getting old enough where they're like starting to, I don't know, get like embarrassed of you scavenging, or are they into it? Are they like, that's cool?
They're old enough that they sort of make fun of me about it. My older kids, I have two 10-year-olds and a 6-year-old, and the 10-year-olds, kind of tease me about it, but I think that they've sort of grown up with it, so they know. If we go to a store, they'll say, Mom, Mom, they want $25 for these pants. Do you know how many pants we could buy for 20? You know, so they're kind of indoctrinated.
Good. That's the way they should be.
And my daughter is starting to come out and go scavenging with me on the weekends. We're working on possibly setting her up with a store.
Wow, that's cool.
She likes the idea. We haven't done it yet, but we're sort of working out how that would.
Yeah, it seems like it's so interesting to think about. It's almost like getting kids to, like, teenagers to sell on eBay would be like the new going out to babysit or cut people's lawns, you know?
Right, absolutely.
So when we were kind of talking off the interview here, you were talking about, so when you were growing up that age, you were kind of into, you like wearing funky clothes and buying at thrift stores. Is that true? Is that something that you've always done?
Yeah. I like I said before, I think it all started because I grew up in a Victorian house in New England, and, you know, they used to just bury their trash. So we had sort of a dump site that we discovered in the yard where we would dig up and we'd just find, you know, beautiful pieces of china, you know, with, you know, painted flowers on them and old medicine bottles and just all this neat stuff. And I think that's probably where it all started, was just the thrill of discovery of old stuff.
Yeah, I mean, having grown up in Texas and, you know, it's watching, like, horror films, I always think of those old Victorian houses as, like, the horror houses up in New England.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm from Boston, so I grew up in an old farmhouse too, and we would go and dig up all little pieces of china in the yard, and that was just normal, you know?
So interesting. Wow.
Right. And the little pieces of coal, like from the coal stove.
Isn't that funny?
Now, I'm just wondering, so when you were like a teenager, were you into punk music? Is that? Yeah.
And that was, you know, some of where the thrift shopping was coming in was just to get the crazy clothes.
It's so interesting. Yeah, it's almost like we love doing this podcast because I feel like we kind of start uncovering like where the people that grew up as punks, like where we're all
where we are now.
It's like you know.
Right, and it's funny because I don't have. I mean, now in other words, you wouldn't look at me and ever think that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just completely boring, you know. But part of that, I think, is, or maybe I'm just trying to justify this to my younger self. I don't know. But part of that is the whole punk ethic, right? Is, you know, I mean, I'm just wearing jeans and a shirt from the thrift store.
Yeah.
Care. I'm not buying
exactly. Yeah, I think that's the exact.
It's practical, being who you are.
Yeah, and not caring like what anybody thinks what you're wearing. Like, it feels like we live in a rural area, and you could wear literally anything and just nobody cares. It's just like, you know, it's not like when you're in, you know, the cities where it's like, you know, everyone's a fashionista and whatever. It's like, it doesn't matter.
Right. I know. Now when I go into a city or something, I feel like
I know. Trust me, I do too. But yeah, I think that's a part of, like, you know, being a punk is just like, don't care, doing what I'm doing, you know. And
just trying to craft a whole different lifestyle for yourself, not putting yourself on somebody else's scale. Scale.
I think that's exactly it, and I think that's why I find it interesting, because I just remember growing up and baby boomers calling us like slackers and
Generation X.
And really it was just more about or at least I didn't want to, you know, buy into these lifestyles that were being handed to me. So it's interesting to see us as we all grow older, how we've kind of ended up, and you know, so here we are, selling old stuff on eBay.
Well, it's like, it was kind of like what you're saying before, though, Kate, is like the freedom of your time and being able to, you know, accommodate other parts of your life, like when the kids get sick or whatever, you want to like hang out with your kids on the weekend. Like, you know, it's what we always talk about. It's the freedom of your time. Like today, after this interview, we're like, what should we do today? You know, like, who else has that freedom? It's amazing.
Right. Exactly. I know the whole advertising culture and everything is totally geared to how stressed out you are because you don't have enough time to do all the things, and so you need to buy all the things so that you have time, and that so you feel like you've made cookies with your kids because you bought this tube of dough and sliced it up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so all of this was kind of an intro to what we really wanted to talk to you about, and that is finding and selling the kind of one-of-a-kind high-end items. You know, we've been talking on the blog about this in the past month or so, you know, about like that I think is the real difference about selling on eBay versus selling on Amazon. You know, Amazon's like you go out and you buy a bunch of stuff made in Chinese factory, the margins are really low, but on eBay, the real way I think a lot of us make our money is finding those like really interesting, strange, designer-like items, buying them really cheap and selling them for like 3,000% profit.
Right.
And you know, and you
sounds crazy.
and you on the blog have been really interesting because I think you've really kind of verbalized it in a way that I have not been able to. And you know, and I was just wondering if maybe you could just talk about like what made you attracted to those kind of items and how you're finding them out there.
Well, I think, I mean, again, to go back to the Victorian dump site, I just have always loved finding interesting things. And, I mean, I've always loved thrifting. I worked at an antique shop for a while in the 90s. It's just maybe, I don't know, a different aesthetic.
I'll tell you from our point of view, so, you know, we've talked about the first couple of years on eBay, we just sold clothes and shoes. Because it's kind of what we knew.
Could find.
It's what it seemed easy to find, and we would look at the people at the flea markets, and they would just be selling all this junk, and we'd be like, what a crazy business. Why would anyone do that? And then suddenly we started to, like, just be attracted to, I think, what you're talking about. We would walk by a table and just see just a weird item that we've never seen it before. It could be a shape. It could be because it was made out of wood or a metal. And we would just get attracted to it. And we would be like, I wonder if anyone would buy that.
Yeah, like, what is that?
And then, you know, I would buy this item for $1 and then it would sell for like 50, you know?
I think that I was always, for me, the attraction to these things came first.
Right.
So whenever, you know, I mean, so I've always gone to rummage sales and thrift stores and stuff. And really, when I think about it, I've just sort of looked at stuff and bought things once in a while. I don't even know why, and then sort of amassed this little like midden of weird stuff that I liked. I was doing that first and selling it.
I see.
So I think that for me, it was the idea that I could sell it was the second idea, not the. So I didn't change what I was selling. I just changed by starting to sell it. I first started selling on Etsy in probably like 2007 or 2008 because I was finding all this great stuff at book sales that was really just, it was like end of the sale, old books that were falling apart and old blueprints and just really neat stuff. And I said, there's got to be an artist out there who wants this stuff. And so I started selling on Etsy. And I was selling very, very low dollar items. So I was always selling interesting and funky stuff, but I was selling it for like $3.
Oh my God.
If I sold something seriously, I mean, if I sold something for like $20,
you were like, wow.
I would be like dancing for like a week, you know? I mean, part of it was at that point, it was really sort of like a hobby or something that I was just doing for pleasure and just the enjoyment of finding these great things and saving them from being thrown away and getting them into the hands of somebody who was going to do something with them and recycle them into something else. I mean, it really was like I was part of like a recycling process.
Kind of like, you know, those of us that, you know, we love Craigslist and a free cycle. You know, we are always putting things on a free cycle if we have something that's too big to take to a thrift store and just want to
you want someone to use it again and repair it or whatever.
After doing that for some period of time, I started, and it was really, I mean, as a personality type, I'm very sort of cautious and shy, and so this was a very long process of years of me kind of emerging and saying, I started out just selling books and paper and stuff like that. Well, what if I started selling other things? And what if I started selling things that were more expensive? But, I mean, this was like a process of years of me sort of slowly emerging. Simultaneously, at this point, the kids are getting a little bit older. I'm having a little bit more time to get out. I'm spending more time doing this, and I'm feeling more pressure to actually be making it financially beneficial and not just sort of a vanity project. So all these things are kind of coming together. And so then gradually I started picking up more expensive things. I mean, and by more expensive, I mean, $5.
Right, sure.
and selling them. So, I mean, but it took a long time.
So I'm going to give you a challenge here because it's a challenge that I'm not sure if I can do. Can you explain to people who are hearing this about, like, what exactly are we talking about? Like, how do you know when you look at this weird item that it's worth something? Like, why does it attract you?
I think that the more time you spend in thrift shops and antique stores and flea markets and rummage sales and everywhere that you can scavenge, and the more time you spend just picking everything up and looking at it and flipping it over and seeing how it's made and what it is and, if it has geese on it or whatever. I feel like I'm forever finding things those white
am
geese,
right there with you.
those kitchen geese. The more time you spend doing that, I mean, the more you get a sense of sort of what's commonplace. So conversely, you get a sense of what's rare and what's interesting and what you haven't seen before. And I mean, a lot of times what I haven't seen before, I flip it over and it says IKEA on the bottom, and I, grumble it and put it back. But it's all, I mean, it's all learning. I mean, I don't know if there's some inherent quality that, that always leaps out at you because everything has its own, a mid-century modern thing is going to stand out in a completely different way from new studio pottery or something Victorian. Or, do you know what I mean? I don't know that there's one sort of thing. But maybe just different, I mean, if you're out there, sort of in the waste stream, when eventually certain things start to gleam, you've never seen it before. You've seen a lot of stuff. And you've never seen, X.
I think that's
before,
a really good way to put it. I definitely think, so we've been selling more like these harder, good stuff rather than clothes for, 4 or 8 years now or so. And definitely we're much better at it now where, I've picked up and seen a lot of different things and now I know better what is special. Like, wow, this is something I've never seen before. Or I've only seen this one time and, it sold for a lot of money, so it's going to sell again.
Right, and it's funny because, I mean, on the one hand, you flip something over and it's signed or it has something that you can research. I mean, that's one thing. But then sometimes you can't research it or you can't research it right there or it's just how it feels. So there's sort of, the research intellectual piece of it and then there's also just the gut feeling piece of it because something like maybe like the Dansk stoneware. To me, it doesn't feel all that different from like maybe the Sango stoneware. I'm forever finding this Sango Japan, and they both have like this brown speckled pattern, So there's a case where, for whatever reason, people like the Dansk. They don't like the Sango. I haven't held them in my hand to really compare if there's a difference in feeling, but there's somewhere where the brand name, the part that can be researched, does make a difference. In whether or not you buy it in the thrift store or take it from the dump. Or whatever.
So I think this is a good segue here. I want to talk about the research in a second, but did you mention that one place where you scavenge or have been scavenging is at your local dump, and that they have an interesting way to allow people to kind of pick out of the waste stream? Yeah,
they have a shed. It's sort of it's like a shed with only three
It's like
sides.
a lean-to or something, And
like a lean-to. The closest I could get was A-frame, and I knew that wasn't right. Yes, it's like a lean-to. You can put stuff in there, stuff that you don't want anymore but other people might want. You can take stuff from there. And It's funny. Some people in town call it Macy's. Some people call it Tiffany's. It's a very active spot. The town where I live is very, very economically diverse. There's one part of it that is summer homes and vacation homes for people from New York City. So there's just, untold amounts of money there. And then there's sort of the part where we live, which is, really very blue collar. And, we've got sort of high and low and everything in between. So there's a real mix of stuff coming in and out of the dump. On weekends, for a while, it used to get pretty hairy over there. There's about 4 parking spaces. And there were some people who were very competitive about picking stuff up. And they would actually approach, like if you went to drop stuff off, they would approach you at your car and, sort of compliment what you had and offer to carry it into the building, so they could sort of get first dibs at it. And that actually it was a little bit intimidating. It wasn't intended that way, I don't think, but the town started getting complaints. So now there's a big sign that says, you're limited to 15 minutes a day and don't approach people in their vehicles. And yeah, it's funny. But, there's been fantastic stuff.
Oh, I'm sure.
I've insane Oriental rugs.
And, it makes me sad just to think of what got by, and what people didn't even think to put in that lean-to,
Well, that's right. Or towns where they don't have one. The next town over doesn't have a free house. Everything just goes right into the dumpster. I know. Well, there was one woman who was always there, and she would, a few times a year, have these insane yard sales with everything that she had gotten from the dump. And some people were very irritated, like, well, that's violating, sort of the spirit of the free house, that, you're supposed to take things and, drop things off and take them only if you need them and not to resell them. But anything that doesn't get taken away gets thrown in a dumpster, and the town has to pay for it, to dispose of it, by weight. So really, I think she was doing a service. Plus, she was a fantastic source.
Oh, I'm sure.
For me.
Yeah, that's always a gray line where you're just like, people say that about even thrift store shopping, where it's like, if you are shopping to resell, like, some people feel weird about that. Or like you say, like, some people I know get stuff off recycle and resell it. And it's kind of a...
Right. Yeah, there are people, I think, who feel very strongly that buying things at thrift stores to resell is somehow morally wrong.
But you're giving them money.
I think that's just, that's completely misguided, because, first of all, most of the thrift stores locally are affiliated with charities. So if they don't have a turnover of goods, they're not making money for their charity.
Plus
there is so much stuff. There is no shortage of secondhand stuff. I think that the position that you shouldn't buy at thrift stores to resell is coming from people who probably aren't spending a lot of time out there scavenging and out there seeing just what's out there on the secondary market or the waste stream. Or
and I guess I can imagine people that are actually giving away these like brand new clothes to these places. Just they probably get a bit miffed that someone would be just picking it up and reselling it, but really it's more on them. The fact that they're giving away such nice items. It's like they're the ones like don't be giving away such nice stuff. It's like, why don't you use that? Don't waste so much.
And when you resell it, you're finding that one. When you sell it online, you're finding that one person who could be in the UK or they could be in Australia. You're finding that one person in the world who wants that thing. That person from Australia was never going to walk through that thrift shop door in Connecticut and find that
especially
item.
When we're selling like weird, one-of-a-kind, a vintage or maybe antiques. We always think like sometimes this stuff only pops up once every generation, So someone dies, it pops up in the waste stream, And it can either be picked up and sold to someone, and then it's going to be kept in someone's home for another generation because it goes on a shelf, or it's going to go in the trash.
Right,
so it really is like a really sliver of a moment when either that item is going to be saved or it's not.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so for those of you who are hearing us right now, I think this is the moment where you should really perk up. This is what I really wanted to get to, and that is a research. You know, we talked about all these funky items, these weird items that you see. You've kind of also on the blog been able to explain well how you go about researching these items, and we've learned that too, because that's really where you take an item that you buy for $1 or even find in the trash for a free and figure out that it's worth
a lot more,
$100+. So what is its process? Are you actually searching in a store for things or researching?
I do have my phone out in the store. Sometimes if I see something interesting that I haven't seen before, but I don't have huge feelings about it, I'm just wondering, is this valuable, is this not, or are there already a million of these on eBay or not? I will just do some preliminary research that way. I mean, I won't do a whole research of an artist's name, and I won't do a whole in-depth.
So basically, you're just going to eBay sold items or completed items, right?
Right. And that would be more typically for like maybe a China pattern that I haven't seen before that, this is interesting, but is, and it's readily marked, and, it'll just take me, 10 seconds to sort of see, are there already a million of these for sale? Do they sell? Yes or no? And that's also part of that's just part of the learning process too. Now that you've done that, you don't have to do it the next time you remember this pattern is good or it's not good.
We always tell people that they ask us if we have like Terapeak, and there are all these services that you can pay for if you subscribe to them every month, and we don't do any of that. If I do any searching, it's the same exact thing. I'll see a brand or some name, and I might do a completed items, but honestly, most of the stuff is so cheap that we just kind of go
get it
with our gut, because we don't want to waste time. Because, it takes time to like connect to the internet, and you're trying to search, and I'd rather just shop the place.
If you have a gut feeling, like you're saying, it's all about the gut feeling. Like if something's cheap enough and you're like, this is interesting and weird and whatever, I really like it, just get it. It's just like, there's no question. Just do it. I mean, you're going to make your money back no matter what.
Right. And I mean, I found some interesting Japanese watercolors that were, they were nicely framed. They were people, they were of people. They were extraordinarily well done. They were both signed. So, and they were, $8 or whatever. So it was at that, I didn't stand there, researching the art. I mean, I just obviously knew here's something really interesting.
Exactly.
And then when you get home, or I know when we get home, like we went out yesterday to like an estate sale like thing, bought a bag of stuff, and part of half the fun is buying it. The other half is bringing it home, and you take it out and you can really look at it and then start doing the research.
The deep research.
Now you sound like you do real deep research.
Some of the examples you were talking about, you've really done.
So what is your process when you're finding a piece of art or whatever, sculpture? Like, how are you doing that research?
I think that I'm getting a little bit hung up on this word process, only because I really am. I'm very like ADHD, like just the whole idea that I would have a process is I don't.
Okay.
That's part of the problem. But I do really enjoy doing this deep research because I just completely get absorbed. You can go so deeply into some of these objects and some of the questions, and then you can sell them and let them go.
Right.
And
so
to the
can you
next
verbalize or give us an example of a piece that you got in your level of research and why it was exciting to you?
Something I was just working on this morning, I bought these slate and walnut bookends. They're sort of, they're made by the slate and the walnut are sort of laminated, together into these stripes. And there's a whole line of similar things. I've seen ice buckets and trivets and all these things. And Mine on the bottom had a label that said Harpswell House, Maine. While I was researching it, I saw that people, some sellers and some auction houses were attributing these bookends and some other pieces to these artists and furniture makers, Paul Evans and Philip Lloyd Powell, and they were selling them for, hundreds of dollars, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. But mine had this Harpswell House label. These two furniture designers and artists were in Pennsylvania. Harpswell House is in Maine. I started researching, and it seemed to me that Paul Evans and Philip Lloyd Powell were probably not involved in making these pieces. I listed them, and I just said in the listing, some people say say these are attributed, but I don't have any independent knowledge. While they were listed, somebody from California emailed me this very hostile email that said, there's no way that these were created by these, by these two men, and they gave some examples why they thought that they weren't, and they said, but you're probably just like everybody else, and you're going to, ignore what I say and just, try to get big money for them or, whatever. And I wrote back to him totally excited.
Like, thank you.
Thank you so much for, thank you so much for your opinion, blah, blah, blah. And so we've emailed back and forth a few times. In the meantime, the bookends sold. I've continued to research. I looked again at I looked up the patent number that was on the bottom of the bookends, and I found as part of the patent application a diagram that shows the bookend itself. The two artists aren't anywhere on this patent application. It's clearly just a business thing from this place in Maine. So I actually have a little, it's not really a blog because I don't update it that much, but it's just sort of a website where I write up these little attribution questions and things. And so I'm putting the final pieces on that, so that'll probably go up in the next couple of days.
That's interesting, too, because all that research then will be documented online, so the next person that finds these kind of things will be able to find them. That's cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Right, but it's all part of just like how I geek out over
No, I think that's a good example, and if someone's bored by that, it means that they should stick to selling, cheap stuff at a Walmart, because, really, like, This is exactly what we do too. It's like sometimes it's a rabbit hole where I'll spend an hour going through weird people's blogs or websites that they created in 1999. It's all about a certain kind of glass from a certain time period, or you go through eBay and like I recently found or both of us found like this old lamp. It was like a brass lamp that was
a chase lamp.
Yeah, found in the trash. Yeah. And it didn't have any name on it. Only on the back it had a centaur. And so
that said Chase.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I Googled that and found out like it was made by this company Chase. It's Art Deco. It looks old, so modern. Like it could have been made today. Wow. And I found out that the company in World War II became the largest maker of bullets. Its brass, its bullets back in the war. And then after the war, the company just kind of fizzled out. So it's just so interesting. But I loved learning about that, about the manufacturing.
Oh, it's a whole way of it's a whole way of just exploring, sociology, anthropology, history,
And it's the difference between selling something for $30 or selling it for $300. Like if you've done the research, like you said, if those bookends were attributed to those artists, that's a huge difference in what you're going to actually sell it for.
Right. And of course, mine are safely sold, so now I can puncture the...
How much did they sell for?
Now I can puncture having sold them. I think it was about $100. Which, if they had actually been, there are known auction houses who have attributed these bookends and other things to these men, and the same or very similar bookends sold for $650. Or something where and that's actually, you guys have a podcast where you were talking about how you brought your paintings to the auction house and the guy just looked it up, looked up the name, Googled the name, and I think that that's part of it too. Like I found some paintings at a local thrift store, and they were dated in the 50s, signed Henry Ives Cobb. I looked him up online, and, some of his paintings were sold as part of the Leona Helmsley estate by Sotheby's or Christie's, I can't remember right now. Everywhere that they had sold said, that he had, whatever the dates were, he had died in 1931, and my paintings were dated in the 1950s. And they were clearly done by the same person, who had done these ones online. So that was my first really huge research project. And it turned out that the Cobb family was like the, total one percenters of their, of their day. So they were like with the Vanderbilts and the, these other families. So every time any of them did anything, it was like in the New York Times. And so there was just a ton of information out there. And I realized that these paintings had all been done by Henry Ives Cobb Jr. Henry Ives Cobb was a famous architect from Chicago, and I think, if we can say, oh, they're by this famous architect, then they've got, inherent value. So that might, why research anymore? These dates make it impossible for it to be him. Let's just say it was him. So I ended up doing this whole huge project on Henry Ives Cobb Jr. that ended up, I just posted it as a Wikipedia article, a whole biography of him.
So it sounds like you're almost creating a market for this new artist that was kind of, unknown or, undocumented.
Or it was misattributed. I feel like...
What a cynical thing to say.
I feel like it's interesting that you brought up that line of research, though, because it seems like many people might have sold things that were misattributed, to his father or whoever he was related to, and it was actually him.
Yes, and it was actually him. And, that was just a huge project that, I contacted different museums, different archives. It was a huge year. It was over a year of stuff. I was really super involved with it around Christmas time. And I remember the kids standing around like, Mom, are you going to buy any Christmas presents? Because I was just, books and, the computer and, So Henry Ives Cobb has sort of become a joke in our house. Like whenever I get excited about anything, the kids go,
no, not again.
One of the first pieces of, everyone has that first piece of art. One of the first pieces of art we bought was at an auction. And, we had like dollar signs in our eyes, of course, because the name, the guy had a Wikipedia article. So
he's a known American
So we
artist.
bought it, and we paid way too much for it. We paid like $400 for it, and we thought it was going to be worth so much. But it's interesting doing the research of this guy, and then we actually found his grandson, or whatever, his great-grandson, who lived just 100 miles from our home. So we emailed him. He invited us over.
With him.
He lived in this gorgeous house outside of D.C. or in D.C.
Georgetown. Yeah, very fancy.
And his walls had all of his great-grandfather's art.
He was the collector of his of his art.
And I kept waiting for him to offer us, $100,000 for this piece of art.
No, 1,000. We were thinking we make 1,000.
I wanted 100,000. Anyway,
you're crazy.
He just, he was very, kind and told us the history, and then he was like, "All right, see you later." And then we just put it up in an auction, and it sold for about what we bought it for.
It sold for $500. So with all the fees, we broke even. I think he bought it at auction.
Yeah, I think so.
Because it was on the phone. I think he bought it.
Yeah.
So,
but anyway, it was just a lot of fun. I think that's the other thing about finding these kind of objects is that it can take you on these adventures, either online or in person.
This doesn't really tie into eBay selling at all. But at one of these book sales, I found a Bible, one of these old, Victorian family Bibles. Everybody, the births and deaths are recorded in. And so I Googled some of the names. I found somebody on a genealogy website who was looking for information about the family. And so I contacted her and just sent her the Bible for nothing. It was so phenomenal because it was this crazy thing that her father and mother had married when they were 17 years old, when he had come down to Panama to dig the Panama Canal. and then he had tragically died, leaving her widowed at 18 or something. The two sides of the family, you know, his side was from the United States and her side was from Panama, and so she had nothing. She had no family heirlooms or anything of any kind. And then so I sent her this Bible, and she was just,
I bet they talk about you at every holiday occasion.
That's
like,
amazing.
This angel from, you know, from America.
the internet.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, it's something that we've been, I mean, it's not huge high dollar, but it's entering its niche to us, is that we've been buying old, like, Facebooks or
yearbooks, like
yearbooks.
College and high school yearbooks.
Because we just sold one to a guy, you know, it was like high school 1971, and he was like,
that's my yearbook.
I've been trying to find this, you know?
Yeah,
like,
it's just so great.
There is just a great feeling, and looking around my house, I think anybody would laugh to hear me say this, but there is a great feeling in getting something back where it belongs.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, just getting something to its right.
The proper owner.
And because, you know, we do like to make a dollar, is that, you know, the reason why a lot of these things sell for a good amount is because it has an emotional connection. And that's really what makes these things important to people, is that, you know, they're willing to spend, you know, a good amount of money for something that just means a lot to them. It might have been a part of their life, or it reminds them of some part of their family or life.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And that's good.
I'm holding on to a book right now because it's an old cookbook used by English missionaries in India. You know, in the last century, and it's got some names in it. And I Googled the names, and I think I found the family of the descendants. But the book seems to have a very high inherent value.
Yeah.
So I'm just it's sort of in limbo as angel and devil on my shoulder.
Know.
Yeah.
Both whisper in my
You should be like, hey, descendants, I've got this for sale on eBay.
I know. So right now it's just sort of sitting there on the shelf. I'm not really doing it. I just look at it every once in a while.
I think, too, for, you know, people who are hearing this, I mean, I just have to remember what I used to be like, you know, selling clothes and shoes. That was what we did. I would go to these flea markets, and I would almost like just walk really fast, because most people didn't have clothes and shoes, but I would find them, and that's what I would buy. I would pass over everything else, and everything just looked like junk.
We had blinders on, basically.
It was like I had blinders, and then when we started doing this and doing its research, you know, every minute I spent researching a new object, I now go to these places, and it's almost like I'm a robot, where I just have like a vision now. When I look over everything, I see history, I see design,
things
I see
light up,
artist names. Yeah, it's just so interesting, and that's why, like we said, doing an hour of research is really a valuable, you know, skill.
Yes, and also training yourself in other ways. I mean, going into the shops so that you know what's, you know, wheat and what's chaff, but then also when you're at home, just reading things. There's a seller on eBay who sells old auction catalogs, and I've ordered some old auction catalogs, not so much for selling prices, because those can really fluctuate over 5 years. Something can be really hot and then not, but just to get a sense of names and lines and, you know, sort of general feeling and moves of things that are desirable, that are higher end, that are, you know, art objects. Because some of them, I mean, as you're saying, to the untrained eye, they might look like junk, or they might just look ugly.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you don't know. Or you sort of go, I think that's probably from the 70s, and that's about all I can say about it. But, you know, if you're training yourself, you know, and learning the lines, even just looking at the pictures.
Yep.
Well, I mean,
like
you know, I think you had mentioned, and we do it's this too. You subscribe to some magazines. like home, it's magazines.
Oh, yeah, El Decor.
Yes.
Right.
That's the El Decor. Just to get a sense of not because my house looks like that, or I even aspire to have my house look like that, but because just to get a sense of what are designers using and how are they putting things in a room, and
on our
what type.
Right.
I mean, like on our dining room table right now are just like free catalogs from Pier 1 and Pottery Barn and Restoration Hardware. Those are valuable because you see that people are paying $100 for a reproduction like hook or old, or they'll buy rugs that are meant to look old
for $900.
For $900,
you're just like, okay.
I know.
So that kind of thing gives us confidence when we list
prices,
an old beat up Persian rug that's torn. When we put it up for $300, we know that there's someone out there that thinks that's a good
price.
Thinks that that's a good deal.
Exactly.
Right. And I mean, you can look at it in a new way. So, so that's good for you, just I don't know, as a non-financial matter, but then to have the knowledge to put it up there at a good price point and to create value out of this thing that was, $10 or however much it was at the thrift store, because lying there in the thrift store, it doesn't
it looks like junk. Right.
We've had people give us these old carpets for $1 because they think we're doing them a favor by just taking them away because they were just going to throw them out. So that's it's difference. I mean, I think the other thing too, when you talk about spending so much time learning and researching, I'm assuming that helps too. Then when you write up the item on eBay or Etsy, that's valuable because when someone looks and is going through to buy an item, having all that info gives people a confidence to pay the kind of price that you're asking.
Yes, I think so, because you can say, you can refer to either what it actually is, or you can, if you haven't been able to figure out what maybe a piece of furniture, if you haven't been able to figure out exactly what it is, you can say, in the manner of, this person or that person, or, to place it sort of in the context, of its time, and to show that you yourself have the knowledge and the eye to, what I mean? It sort of bolsters confidence in you as a seller. So it's not just wood, table with inlay. It's wood table with inlay, in the manner of, this or that designer. It puts confidence that you have a good eye and a good knowledge base as a seller. I
think what's interesting is that I still feel like kind of an amateur, because when we go to like an antique mall or to an auction, there'll be like people that have been doing this for a long time, older people that have been focusing on antiques for a long time. They have so much more knowledge than we do. But, what they don't do is they don't do the internet. And I just think it's so interesting how, there's this whole subculture of people that just are missing out because they just choose not to put their knowledge in their inventory online.
Right. Just that the extra hurdle of, whether it's the hurdle of photographing and listing and shipping and mailing, or if I think you've suggested this in the past, or if it's that they don't want their financing
cash only.
Yes.
That's
track.
right.
They just want to do as much cash as possible.
There is a simplicity to that I can get attracted to, where your financial status by how much cash is in your pocket, that's all it is. That's such an interesting way to live. The other thing that it's mentioned recently on the blog is, I think it would help people for us to try and explain this, is that this vintage antique market on eBay works differently from eBay. Because there are people, from Amazon, is that there are people who don't want to pay the lowest price. They actually want to pay more. They're suspect if they see something that they think is worth more, but it's actually very low priced.
Yeah, I don't fully understand it because it's so far from the way that I think about things. but it's been, and it's a lesson that's taken me a really long time.
I think
to
we
learn.
all go through this, yeah.
But I think that something that is unique, like a painting or a sculpture or something like that maybe doesn't have a true inherent value in terms of just the materials or whatever. It's sort of like, it seems like maybe at $15 or $35, it's just junk that nobody's going to look at. But if it's $150, suddenly it's something, even though it's the same thing photographed and described in the same way. I can't explain it from anything but a complete outsider perspective, because I really don't get them where that would why.
Well,
that
I was looking for lighting. We have one piece that we need a lamp in one of our hallways that we've never installed, and I was looking for lighting, and I was finding all this amazing kind of like vintage industrial looking lamps for like $30, and I'm like, why? Oh, they're from China. Like, that's why, I'm like, I'm willing to pay up to $100 for a real vintage, light that I know is not a knockoff, like, I'm clearly gonna just like discount all the cheap ones.
And so if people are pricing things too low, it makes these kind of buyers think, well, it must be
just
a
cheap
knockoff.
Yeah.
There must be something wrong with it. You know? The only way I can explain it is there's a certain kind of buyer out there. It's like the kind of person that buys fancy clothes. When I look at like a polo shirt and then I look at just like a regular kind of a knockoff shirt, they both look the same to me, except one has like a logo on it or something is like that. But there's a person who like will only buy the more expensive one because for some reason they want to buy something that's more special. The fact that they're paying more means that it's special.
Well, it's like status. It shows. I mean, that in particular with a Ralph Lauren logo. I mean, people are like, "Oh, you paid $100 for that shirt."
The purple label,
Yeah, or whatever.
Right.
So that's a different.
Right. There was a sculpture that I mentioned in the notes. It was this plastic sort of sculpture thing it was sort of a sculpture and sort of a toy from the 70s or 80s, and I picked it up because I just knew from looking at Elle Decor and other things that this would be something that somebody would have on a shelf or on a travertine, side table or something, and it was very inexpensive, and I just almost sort of a perceived value experiment put it up for $150. Wow. I mean, brand new, like new old stock ones were selling for $200 to $300 maybe, but this was not new old stock. This was very old, and it had oxidation, and so I put it up, and I got an offer within days for $125.
Wow.
And I mean, it's literally, in terms of inherent value, it's literally pieces
plastic,
of
or what? Yeah,
plastic. Yeah, I mean, it's a cool thing. And I was happy with the price that I paid for it at the thrift store. I might have kept it for that price.
Yep.
Right.
You know what I mean? But
we just imagine, and I think this was hard for us too, because we aren't those kind of people. We don't have fancy things in our house, but I have to remember that the person buying this is probably an artist or something,
or a decorator or a designer.
Right.
Yeah, you really have to think about. Okay, who would want this for $125?
People willing to pay for something beautiful and rare to sit in their home, and that's okay.
And that was finally and this is, my husband used to say this to me all the time, and then I finally got it. You are not your buyer.
That's
your target buyer is not you. It's somebody for whom $125 for this interesting, plastic sculpture thing is nothing. Is just, look at how that maybe that was inexpensive.
Right.
Now, we talk to a lot of ladies that sell on eBay, and it seems like their husbands go one way or the other. Is your husband one who is like thinking it's cool what you do, or is he like, quit dragging home all this junk?
I think he's somewhere in between. I think that He's a historian and a reader, and so I think that for him the research part of it and all of that is what sort of makes the piles of stuff all over the house tolerable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it does, there is a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Does he ever bring a feedback? Like, does he ever pick up an item and be like, oh, I know all about this. Let me tell you about it.
No, he's more American Revolution era, so I haven't found too much from there. But he has recently picked up a few things from the side of the road and brought them home, which he never would have done.
Now, to kind of wrap up here, I think it's interesting because, people like us that are, finding odd objects. I find, we're always having to, or it's naturally are expanding our range. It's always new objects. And you were mentioning you're now finding a furniture. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, this table that I found is just a little, it's, maybe 18 by 18. Right. It was like the littlest one of a set of nesting tables. I don't feel comfortable moving into furniture yet just because of the hassle factor. Right now I actually have a friend who's a furniture dealer, so if I find something, I call him and let him know about it.
Ooh, that's great.
But it's kind of, but it sounds like it might be a new thing where you could at least keep an eye out for.
Right. Oh yeah. Yes, definitely. But that's kind of the cool thing about selling on eBay and scavenging, though, is that, I'll be at the thrift store, and there's five or six of us in there, and we're all scavengers, and we're all looking for something different.
Exactly.
And we're all, we're pumping money, into the charity, and we're all pulling stuff out, and there's enough for everybody.
So at this point, our internet connection and Kate's phone got a little crazy and cut out. So we'll say thanks to Kate, and we really enjoyed the interview, and we hope you guys did too. Bye.